Chapter 401 Advance into Mordor. Unexpectedly, after taking a fiery combo from Leeway and Little Pink, Sauron remained completely unhurt. He dispersed the black mist around him, charged forward, leapt high, and swung his mace. Caught off guard, Little Pink took a heavy blow, stumbling back several steps and nearly throwing Leeway off balance. The strike was so powerful that some of her scales were torn loose and her health bar fell a notch. "Go handle the Ringwraiths and Mordor's army," Leeway ordered. Without hesitation, he jumped down and engaged Sauron personally again. Little Pink flew off to tackle Mordor's high-value targets. She knew she was no match for this dark, ugly, armored foe whose plate was nowhere near as finely made as Leeway's. The battlefield roared. This was one of the largest clashes of the era. As the attackers, the Human Alliance army spread across the plain in a magnificent silver tide, evoking the grandeur of the last alliance, hailed as Middle-earth's greatest force. Opposite them surged a dark flood on a starless night. Orcs, uruks, ogres, ologs, native Mordor spiders from the southern valleys, and savage beasts from the northern breeding grounds. Mountains and plains swarmed with countless screaming evils. Still, Mordor was clearly on the back foot. The alliance pierced the enemy lines like a keen blade, forcing them gradually toward the Black Gate. Leeway was the tip of that blade. As he pressured Sauron back step by step, the troops behind him surged forward, felling enemies on both flanks. They were unstoppable. But the deeper the alliance pushed into Mordor, the wider the fighting spread, and the more enemies they faced. In the open ground before the Black Gate, the pressure had come from one side. Inside the gate, it came from all directions. The encirclement tightened. It was hard to say if Sauron was truly being driven back or feigning retreat to lure the alliance deeper into a trap. If that was his plan, it failed. The army stood like an iron wall against the black tide. Elsewhere, the scene was darker. In the pass of Cirith Ungol, near Minas Morgul, shadows began to creep up from the deep caverns. Shelob, lying wounded in her lair, felt the tremor of the web and the sweet, tender scent of fresh flesh. She crawled up despite her injuries and saw Gollum and the two hobbits he had brought. They argued in low voices. The larger hobbit stepped aside, leaving Frodo alone. Gollum praised the smaller one and then slipped behind a rock to hide. Shelob knew opportunity when she saw it and rushed out, tangling Frodo in her web. Her injuries made her careless. She needed to feed to recover and had not watched where she was exposed. With Frodo caught, Sam was close behind. "Get away from him!" Sam roared as a sharp, short sword plunged into Shelob's flank. Shelob screamed, a sound full of anguish. Sam seized the moment to cut Frodo free and pour a small bottle of milk down his throat. "Leeway said this stuff can cure poison. I wouldn't even drink it when I was thirsty on the road. Please wake up, Mr. Frodo." Frodo did not open his eyes at first, but Shelob did not retreat. She lunged again, aiming to devour Sam. When Sam raised the odd short sword he had been given, she hesitated. "Get away, you wicked great spider," Sam shouted. "This sword was given to me by the legendary Leeway of the North for this journey. If you don't want to die by it, leave now." It would have been better if he had kept quiet. The name inflamed Shelob, recalling a pain she could not forget. He came to this pass. The thought burned through her. Gollum, hidden in the shadows, hissed that the person the hobbits named was not here. "Do not be afraid." Shelob shrugged aside the wordless taunt and surged forward, old wounds flaring at the mention of that name. Just as she prepared to strike and Sam braced in front of Frodo, a light suddenly shone. Frodo had awakened. Remembering Galadriel's advice, he drew forth the crystal phial of light she had given him. The brightness stung Shelob's eyes, nearly blinding her. At the same moment, Sam's short sword, the one gifted by Leeway, and Frodo's sting plunged into Shelob. She let out a terrible cry and crashed into the rocks. The wounds Leeway had inflicted earlier ripped open again, and the new injuries from the two hobbits compounded them. Shelob felt herself being undone. She frantically tried to crawl away, but two more strokes landed. She fell into the dark pit and went silent. "You're next, Gollum," Sam called, but Gollum had already slithered out of sight. Relief washed over Sam. He looked at the short sword in his hand with a new reverence. "It's amazing. I could feel something, like a power helping me when I raised it against that great spider," he said. I want to give it a name, he added, thinking of one of Lewi's famous swords, Nemesis. How about Spider Nemesis? Good name, Sam, Frodo agreed. They resumed their journey. Without Gollum's guidance, the path ahead was uncertain. They slipped out of the cave, expecting to find Mordor's armies massed toward Mount Doom, but the field below was empty. The forces that should have filled the plain had been pulled away to the north. For a moment, they felt blessed luck. Then a hand clamped over Frodo. Before they could react, something brutally strong knocked them to the ground. Sam leapt up with his new short sword, but more orcs spilled out from the nearby tower at Cirith Ungol. The attacker was a blind, limping Uruk, an imposing chieftain. At his bark, the orcs closed in. Sam and Frodo saw they stood no chance against a whole squad and were quickly seized. Their weapons were stripped and thrown to the chieftain. The master ordered that captured hobbits be sent in alive, one orc muttered. But the lame Uruk's eyes fell on Sam's short sword, and his expression changed. He barked another command. Take them to my chamber first. Do not let a soul know. I will interrogate them myself to learn what secrets these spies hold. He waved his men away and spoke fiercely. This is the will of the master. Whoever disobeys or asks foolish questions will be judged a traitor and put to death. For the master, he cried, and the orcs echoed the cry in a rough chorus. Chapter 4 and 2, Defeat. Don't think hobbits are easy to bully, orc. You'll pay for this. Inside a hidden compartment, Sam crouched in front of Frodo, shielding him with a trembling back, eyes fixed on the crippled Uruk chieftain standing before them. The Uruk laughed, a harsh, rasping sound, and then began to move closer. Sam tensed, ready to spring. Then, unexpectedly, the tall Uruk, tall compared to a hobbit, dropped to one knee and with both hands returned Sam's sword to him. Sam and Frodo stared, stunned. What do you mean? Sam managed. The crippled Uruk raised his head. The Lord's name is on this blade. I swore myself to him once. Sam's voice went small. You mean Leeway? Yes, he is my lord. Relief poured through the two hobbits like sun after a storm. They exchanged unbelieving looks, and only when they had both recovered their weapons did they accept that this was not a trick. In a desperate place, an orc had offered them hope. All right, Sam said, sheathing the sword. This blade was forged by Leeway himself and given to me for my travels. When I go home, I'll tell him what you've done. You've done me a great service, the Uruk said. And what should I call you? You can call me Weirdo, or Cripple, or Crippled Weirdo. That'll do, Sam said, forcing a smile. Can you get us out of here? The Uruk's face went grave. It won't be easy. I'm not the only chieftain here. There's another, Shagrat. He's an Uruk too, and he's not like me. I serve the Witch King of Minas Morgul. He serves the Dark Lord directly. He and I have always been at odds, and Shagrat is very loyal to his masters. They had barely finished speaking when a roar and a violent banging sounded at the door. What's all the racket? You tired of living? A voice snarled. The crippled Uruk cursed, gesturing frantically for the hobbits to hide. Sure enough, the door was thrown open, and Shagrat stalked in, scanning the cramped room with a hostile glare. I've heard there are spies on the Cirith Ungol steps. Have you seen any? No, the weirdo replied, calm but sharp. No news of that. Shagrat prowled the room, eyes hard as he looked left and right. Then he sneered. Someone's trying to steal glory. Hiding them, maybe. Are you here to make trouble? The weirdo snarled. The two chieftains bristled, locked in a brittle standoff. Shagrat, lacking proof, could do nothing more for now. He ordered scouts to keep watch and stomped back out, leaving tension simmering in the air. On the wider field, the fight had not let up. Form ranks, commanders cried. The allied forces of the free cities stood in perfect order, shields locked, a disciplined front that held steady under the sky. On the opposite side, the orcish tide kept coming. Hold the line, the commanders yelled. Arrows loose. At Leeway's signal, a deadly rain of arrows arced out from the ranks and tore into the charging orcs, cutting down swathes of them and stalling the assault. One volley cost the enemy nearly a legion, but as corpses fell, more orcs surged over them to fill the gap. War stripped fear and thought. Men and monsters alike pressed on almost mechanically, reacting only to orders, advance, retreat, die. Mordor's forces clogged every visible ridge and crag. Great winged beasts filled the sky with maddening shrieks. No one could tell which carried ringwraiths and which were mere beasts. Fire and dragon breath rained down, each blast taking hundreds of lives. Yet still the human line held and pressed forward. This army was stubborn. It advanced through slaughter and ash. At the very front, Li Wei met Sauron again, their blades and wills clashing. He'd been fighting Sauron for what felt like an age. Dust streaked his face. His staff's stored vis ran low and could be replenished only when passing over fresh orc graves, which in turn let the rune shield catch fragments of breath. Sauron pressed relentlessly, denting armor, finding faint openings, once even striking Li Wei's true body. Li Wei had taken blows, but Sauron had not been unscathed either. Plates were bent and a weak joint torn open, leaking some dark, unknowable filling. Sauron's will was vast, a relentless thing. He wasn't breaking, only bleeding slowly of strength. He had no time to recover as he might in peace. Every moment here burned his reserves faster. Perhaps the battle had run its course. Fatigue or a boredom like it slid across him. For a flicker of a heartbeat, his gaze drifted across the ruined plain, and in that instant, Li Wei struck. He unleashed a sword technique he had scarcely used in the fight, a sudden, brutal rush that knocked Sauron off balance. The greatsword fell, then another blow, and Sauron staggered, armor smashed, a mace torn from his grasp and sent skittering away. With momentum on their side, Li Wei shouted, "Rally to me!" Elites who had been waiting at the edge, mettled soldiers and 2 Legion champions, poured in from the flanks. Before reinforcements could cover him, they and Li Wei drove Sauron down, hammering the Dark Lord with everything they had. The cry went up from above, "Die!" Time seemed to slow for Sauron. The human before him, Li Wei, stood over him, face set, the dark red greatsword poised in a reverse grip for the final blow. The world narrowed to that one descending arc. The battered armor, the dust-smeared face, the blade arcing down. Was this the end? Then a hideous roar split the air, a violent storm tearing across the battlefield. The sky himself seemed to answer with thunder. Rumble, an immense tremor ran through the ranks, and a ringing filled everyone's ears. For an instant minds jolted, senses blurred, and the world held its breath. Chapter 403, Siege. A massive storm erupted, centered on Sauron himself. The movements of both the human allied forces and the orcs and other dark creatures ground to a halt. Everyone was buffeted by the violent winds, many even thrown prostrate. Li Wei and his closest companions at the storm's center were not spared. Caught off guard, they were blown far away. For the first time in a long while, Li Wei felt what it was to be repelled. He scrambled to his feet, ready to charge forward again. But when he looked up, Sauron was gone. "Where did he go?" Li Wei cried, eyes wide, scanning the field. No matter how he looked, there was no trace of Sauron. The elite soldiers and Legion champions who had helped hold Sauron, also blown clear, picked themselves up, looked around, and shook their heads. He fled. Gandalf arrived, panting, Glamdring in his hands and almost completely stained with blood. "That last blow drained him," he said. "He won't be able to strike again for a while." "He's inside," Li Wei said, gazing into Mordor toward the towering silhouette of Barad-dûr. Gandalf nodded. "He has withdrawn to his proud high tower. I don't think he'll dare come out again easily." "Then he won't have another chance," Li Wei replied. Without Sauron, the Mordor host was like a body without a head. Even a retreat told the enemy's story. They were beaten. Mordor's commanders shouted to rally their troops, but it was for naught. In the face of the suddenly emboldened human allied forces, their resistance collapsed. The ringwraiths were driven back, and the fell beasts lost their riders. Freed from the witching control of the Nazgul, the fell beasts finally met real aerial power. Dragons. Dragons were the true lords of the sky. The fell beasts were at best primitive flying creatures, more like oversized pterosaurs. Terrifying to men, perhaps, but small before a dragon's blaze. When another gout of dragon fire tore through the air, the screams in the sky ceased. Some of the fell beasts burned, some fled, none remained over the battlefield. The enemy army crumbled like a collapsing mountain. Under Li Wei's and the other leaders' command, the allied host pushed forward, fighting all the way to the dark walls of Barad-dûr and closing around it. But the tower was not easy to take. It was sturdier than even the reinforced Orthanc. In the days of the last alliance, men and elves had besieged Barad-dûr for 7 years with no breach. Finally, Sauron had appeared and been cut down when Isildur took the ring. Now, As the Allied forces ringed the tower, flaming stones and massive arrows rained down from above with dreadful force. "Fall back!" Li Wei shouted, cleaving a falling stone with his blade as he ordered the troops to withdraw to safer ground. It did not mean they would give up. After a moment, Li Wei had piles of TNT placed along the base of the tower. Crack! One fuse caught. Li Wei pulled back with the rest, running as the first blast roared. A true man never looks back at an explosion, and besides, being a step too slow here would mean being buried in the blast. Boom! The first explosion thundered, then another. The detonations grew in number. Some charges blew out craters at the wall's base, some were flung skyward by the force, and some blasted away orc defenders who had been clinging to the ramparts. When the detonations finally subsided, Li Wei stared at Barad-dûr. The ground was churned into vast pits. The wall had been scarred, but not breached. That dark rampart was more resistant to both fire and explosives than obsidian. It gleamed with a forbidding, metal-like hardness, more steel than stone, like the Black Gate. It was nothing less than a true steel barrier. Li Wei exhaled and frowned. Getting in was going to be difficult, but walls were not bedrock. If he put his mind to it, he could find a way. There were more options if he considered acting alone. Still, Gandalf's voice cut into his thoughts. "Do you remember our original goal, Li Wei?" Gandalf said softly at his elbow. "Barad-dûr is nearly impregnable, stronger than roadside fort. This is Sauron's home. His power is amplified here. Did you see those flaming volleys? He threw everything he had. One wrong move and we'd suffer terrible losses. There's a simpler way to end him." Gandalf looked west, toward Mount Doom. Li Wei understood immediately. Gandalf continued, "Frodo and his companions should already be deep inside Mordor. If we aid them, if the One Ring is destroyed, Sauron will fall. Barad-dûr's defenses will collapse with him. The wicked enchantments will fade, and the tower will open to us." "Makes sense," Li Wei said. He gathered the commanders. "Watch Sauron for me," he ordered. Aragorn stepped forward. "Go. We won't let him venture from that tower." Gandalf stood with him. "I will keep watch as well." The other leaders pledged the same. Li Wei trusted them. Sauron's chance of breaking free was small. If he moved, the allied forces would press him hard. Li Wei left 5 Legion champions and a full company of soldiers who had won the Excellent Ranger medal, positioned to guard the gate and prevent any sudden escape. With Aragorn, Gandalf, and other watchful leaders backing them, even if Sauron could fly, he would be felled by Little Pink's fire. In their planning, Sauron was effectively trapped. With careful arrangements in place, Li Wei departed for Mount Doom. The tide had turned. Sauron's defeat felt inevitable. Still, as he watched Li Wei go, Gandalf felt a cold premonition. He gripped his staff, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. Choosing to place his trust was not an easy decision. It was, in truth, unimaginably difficult. A crucial test was coming. This was to be an age of men. Gondor and Rohan had endured their trials, and many of their leaders had proven their mettle on the road. Some were redeemed, some hardened, some had grown stronger. Yet there remained one person who had not yet faced his truest self. Placeholder could not retrieve Chapter 404. The attempt to fetch the chapter from htdob.com/em/8354/835 to middle 404 failed with the following error. Fetch of with the following trb.com/API/reader get failed due to a network error. Failed to fetch. Unable to retrieve the chapter, the provided URL failed to fetch. Please paste the chapter text here or provide a working link, and I will correct it into coherent, idiomatic English. Chapter unavailable. This is a placeholder. I attempted to retrieve Chapter 46 of Bringing the MC System to Middle-earth from https://www.com/n/novel/835 for Bringing the MC System to Middle-earth, Chapter 406, but the request failed. The fetch to aps.trb.com/get encountered a network error. Failed to fetch. I couldn't fetch the chapter from that URL. Please paste the chapter text here, and I'll correct it into coherent idiomatic English.